Today, we're with Phili, talking about the Brussels sprout of the UK, Luton. We're going to be talking about Marsh Farm and all the amazing work he's doing on the state with his program, Wingman Mentors.
Yeah, we're stoked on this. We're stoked on this conversation. I think that I would be really interested if we just started with you, a little bit about your background, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
That's great. My name's Phili, Simon Philbert, also known as Phili. I'm a rapper, activist, and also a youth mentor. So you like to call it a youth practitioner with the work that I do. But I'm originally born and bred from Luton. Luton's a small place in Bedfordshire in the UK, built up of about 6 to 8 different estates. 2 of the main estates, well, I'd like to call them the main estates, being Marsh Farm and Lucy Farm. So I'm a rapper. I've been doing music for around the last 20 years. I'm part of quite well-renowned UK hip-hop groups known as For Life, Cypher and Phili and Dots. So you can check out some of my music after this podcast if you want to as well. Yeah, I'll send all the links on there. I'll let you know where you can find. You can find me on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you download your music from or stream your music from. So it's just Phili, Siphili. Search that and you'll find all the other stuff that I've been as well. So I've been doing music for about the last 20 years. I still do music here and there, but I've primarily been doing youth work for the last 10 years now as well, alongside with that. Obviously, just to try and make a change in my community, really, with some of the things that I see going on in the town as well. So I'm a dad. I've got 2 kids. One daughter who's 13, a son who's 26. Also got a stepson who's 31 now. So I'm primarily a family man living in Luton, but trying to make a change in my community as well. Luton's a place that I love. I mean, it's spelled Luton. No one from Luton actually pronounces the T in Luton, so it's always Luton. Don't let anybody correct you on that as well. It's a town that, I say, is built up of 6 to 8 different estates, melting pot of different cultures within the whole town. And it's like any town in the country, it's got its troubles and it's got its sort of misgivings like any other town has. But Luton seems to get quite a bad name and a bad reputation because of some of the things that occur in the town as well. I like to call Luton basically the Brussels sprout of the UK. So whereas London is like a cabbage, Luton is just like London. It's got all the badness and everything that goes on in it, but it's a lot smaller. So it's got that condensed taste of a Brussels sprout, basically, which is why some people will take it or like it or they loathe it. So for me, I love it because I'm born and bred here, and I can see where a lot of the problems stem from social economic circumstances and down to people's circumstances within their homes, mental health, and different things like that, and just a lack of a reduction of unity within the community. So where things have got a lot bigger and there's a lot more people in the town as well, there's a lot less community spirit within the town and a lot less unity within that as well. So there are quite a few organisations that try to change that and reverse that and try and do things, bring the community back together again, which is a positive thing. But it's negative news always gets highlighted more than any positive news with social media as well. And always put it down to like in our communities, we used to have a local newspaper that would get put through our doors every Thursday, which would also always have the negative things and the bad things that happen, but you'd also hear the good stories that happened in the town as well. We don't get that anymore. It's all social media. The bad news will always get pushed out to you more than any positive things that have happened in your community as well. So that's part of the problem that we're going through within this town at the moment as well. And also a lot of people have got their own issues around immigration and different things like that. And because of the lack of communication within these sectors, it creates a lot of anger and a lot of despair within the community as well. So we've got quite a lot of gang activity because of Luton being such a hotbed for serious youth violence, and also being known as a hotbed for Islamist radicalisation and also right-wing radicalisation due to people like Tommy Robinson and Jam Charlie, and also influencers like Andrew Tate. It's created quite a melting pot of tension within the town as well. So myself and my partner started an organisation known as Wingman Mentors a couple of years ago, really around mentoring young people. So there's been quite a few high-profile murders, I'd say, and quite a few high-profile incidents of youth violence within the town that have got the town the reputation that it's got. So it's something that a lot of people are conscious of and trying to make a change about as well, really. So
talking about music and music's role in building the reputation of Luton and other marginalized communities, and especially from your perspective as a rapper, do you think about that when you're writing music and producing music? Because a lot of rappers talk about where they're from and their experiences growing up in their communities. And do you think about that in the way that music shapes the way that communities are seen? Because that's another access of information that people outside Luton have access to is music. And so do you think about that role when you're producing music and writing music?
When I first started doing music, well, for us as a group, it was hard coming out as a group because we came from Luton as well. So because we weren't from London and weren't your typical UK rappers, it was hard for us to even be heard or be seen really anyway. And we didn't come from an internet age where we could put our music out there by ourselves to get heard.
Or on TikTok and have it be done.
Yeah, it was easy. It was done. I mean, back in those days, we had to record the music, hopefully get a studio to record the music in, then hopefully get it to a DJ such as Tim Westwood or Max and Dave on Kiss FM or something like that, and then sit there on a Friday night and hope and pray that he played your music as well. Do you know what I mean? And then going down to shops to pick up magazines to see if your music had been reviewed in it and things like that. So we came from a different age. Just to be able to get seen was hard enough in itself. But then where we found ourselves quite lucky as a group from Luton to then gain success quite early within that. We were lucky enough before our album came out, we were approached by the Gorillaz for us to be feature on some of their music as well. So we recorded the first version of Clint Eastwood and Starshine and a few other tracks to them as well. Things went kind of left with that. As basically where we didn't end up basically being on the main version of the album, but we managed to perform on the Brit Awards and traveled to Japan and toured a lot of the UK with the Gorillaz as well. So with that in hand, with For Life Cypher's success at that point, that's what really got us on the map as well. I was a rapper where I was so heavily influenced by American rap that I used to rap in such a heavy American accent as well. It's embarrassing for me now, but I refuse to talk about things that I didn't really do and it wasn't really about or anything like that. Obviously, I had my shady past and would talk about that, but then was quickly aware of how influential that was when I noticed that my son was listening to my lyrics. And basically, because of my past of dealing drugs and things like that, he would then say it was justified for him to be able to deal drugs or for him to swear or for him to do some of the things that he was hearing from my music. And then that further made me realize that other people who were hearing my music, who aren't even in my country, are then being influenced of what my music's about and also the depiction of what I've given of my hometown and what it's really about. And it's not really about what I was really talking about in the music, and it's definitely not what most rappers are talking about within their music as well. Most rappers will never tell you that they grew up in a 2-parent household went to public school and didn't want for anything like that, because it doesn't make them look edgy or exciting enough for people to buy into that story. But not realizing there's a lot of other people that will relate to that story because they grew up in that same type of household as well. So it doesn't mean you don't have your own problems. I mean, so if we fast forward to now, where we've got drill music, well, not even that, UK hip hop and UK rap itself is a lot more popular than it ever was. And you've got a lot of rappers that are successful with that and making a lot of money. And then their message is what they're putting out in their music is what's influencing a lot of the young people today. So I've worked with young people that are so influenced by drill music and the message that they're getting in their drill music that they'll go out to actually, and then they put themselves as musicians as well. But for them, it's not valid if they're not committing the crimes that they're talking about in their music. So they will actually go out to commit crime, do some time in jail, so that they're actually legitimate when they are rapping and they're talking about on their songs, not realizing how much it's actually affecting their future. When there was a young kid I was working with that was actually a really good rapper, and he was so in depth in crime, and he was also in debt bondage as well, where another drug dealer basically had stolen his drugs that he had was holding for somebody else, so he owed money, so he was constantly in debt to these drug dealers, but he really wanted to like pull through in this music. And then he ended up getting arrested, and then I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks after he got arrested, he was about to go to court. He ended up getting the opportunity to get signed by an American label, but then found out that because of his criminal conviction, he couldn't take the record deal, and then basically gave up on music after that. So it's just really trying to make people understand the consequences of what their music can do. And that's just literally just on your freedom. So there's a lot of young people that have passed away and their lives taken because of their lyrical content and what they're talking about in their music. So for me, music is music, and obviously the internet, which is just a massive influence. But music for me is a definite trigger for me to say that young people can either be influenced in a good way or in a bad way for it. And so, as I say, because of the popularity of drill music right now, a lot of young people are just aiming towards that for quick success.
It's really interesting to hear you speak about that, because I was also wanting to hear about kind of the like reinforcing a reality that might not necessarily be true, and then a young person ends up replicating that reality because they hear it in music is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's how does that even start? Is it like the expectation of like that's what a rap artist should be or a drill artist should be, and then all the artists end up embracing that? And I want to hear a little bit about your work as well, because I know that the work that you're doing with like positive lyrics and how you're trying to turn that on its head and get positive messaging and get young people to express themselves in a more positive way.
Yeah. On your first point, it's hard because a lot of young people are just, as I say, are so influenced by what they see and the music they're seeing and what they're seeing as being successful. So even to try and get a young person, even if they are spitting negative lyrics, just to even try and get them to be individual in the way that they're doing it. There's so many rappers that just sound exactly the same as every other rapper that's doing the exact same thing. It's just a carbon copy of it, and they're just replicating it rather than trying to even show their individuality and tell their own story as well. So it's hard to get somebody to do that, but it's not impossible. And then once you can kind of get them to do that, they can understand there that other people will be able to relate to their story as well. They're not the only person who's gone through that part of that thing in their life. They're not the only person who's actually going through that in their life as well. How I like to describe it to some of the young people I work with is where if you think of a bunch of rappers as a bag of rice, I mean, you can be that one black grain of rice that people are going to see in there, and they're either going to be like, oh yeah, I really like when my rice is a bit dark like that, or they'll be like, oh, I don't like that rice, but at least they paid attention to you, as opposed to just the other pieces of grains of rice that are in this bag that people can just take or leave it. Do you know what I mean? Once you can kind of get a young person to understand that, or not even just a young person, an artist in general to understand that as well, it can make them more of an individual artist in themselves. We live in a time now where hard work beats talent a lot of the time. So you can actually be really good at rapping, but if somebody else could be putting a lot harder work than you, and you won't see the success that you've got. Do you know what I mean? So it's really about what are you actually really talented at, and what makes you you.
It's just really interesting to hear you speak about it, Si, and what these young people are picking up and putting out there, I guess. You mentioned, well, we know music it's a storytelling mechanism, right? So what were the stories that you were originally telling when you first started rapping?
Well, it was telling. I was really telling stories. There's something that I always tell young people right now who are making music now. I'll get back to you. I'll answer that question. But one of the things I always say is, if you're going to be an artist, you've at least got to have one or two songs that you could play for your mum. Yeah, and then most of them are like, oh no, I could never play anything on them, because they're talking about how many people they've stabbed, how much drugs they sell, how many people they've beaten up, and things like that. They're actually snitching on themselves in their own songs. And I'm not telling them not to do that, because that might be their life, and they're basically depicting it in their art form. So that's fine. But are you going to talk about the times where you got beat up? Are you going to talk about the times where you were getting bullied? Are you going to talk about the times when you were in jail and someone was sticking your head in the toilet? I mean, to try and divert somebody else from making those same mistakes, it's all well and good for you to glamorize that in that way, but why would you not tell the opposite side of that, to divert somebody from making those same mistakes as you, rather than encouraging someone to make those same mistakes, even whether subliminally or not? But for me, when I first started making music, I was doing a lot of that. I was talking a lot of stuff that I would never tell my mum that I was doing or anything like that, because she'd be horrified. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, I'd be happy to come and say, oh, look, mum, look at this review that I'm in, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And on a show like Success, but not really, there wasn't any kind of like real heartfelt music that I was making, or heartfelt lyrics that I was doing until I really started taking it serious and then recognized that. And then as time went on, I transitioned to, I was one of those rappers that when I first started was only either talking about negative things I was doing, such as selling drugs or different things like that, or rapping about being the best rapper. When there's only so many songs you can rap about being the best rapper until you get bored of it, and you need to get some real content and some stories and things like that. And that's, for me, that's when music got easier, because I had a topic that I was speaking of, rather than just regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again. So I mean, and then to do that, you need to then be knowledgeable about what you're talking about. So I ended up getting to a point where I was just reading books all the time and just reading different stories and different subjects and different things like that. And if I'd pick on one thing and then be like, right, I want to write a song on this, but I can't write something on something that I'm not knowledgeable about, and then people will question me after that. And then the more content and knowledge I've got on something, gives me the ammo to be able to create that song on that thing. And if it's a heartfelt thing, like there's a song about my dad, for me, nobody could write a song about my dad better than me, in the same way that nobody could write a song about your parent better than you. For me, music's about being relatable, and then other people are going to relate to it. I mean, whether they like the genre of music or not, they can relate to the story. So if I'm talking about a song where I've experienced domestic violence in my house from my dad or something like that, even though it may not be the same kind of domestic violence, somebody else has experienced that in the same way, so they'll be able to relate to that. So it's about being able to be grown enough to know yourself, really, as well. I mean, but I think that's part of the problem we're in the world, where a lot of people don't actually know themselves.
So many community leaders, Si, that we've worked with, they're all like a living case study. They've used a culture, or they've used an activity to create themselves opportunity. We will come to your sort of community leadership and how you're now empowering all this youth and the projects that you're working on. But was music so you mentioned sort of selling drugs at a young age. Was music your way out of that?
No, for me, it's different now to how it was then. Like when I was younger, I was groomed without even realizing that I was being groomed, and it's the same situation of what's happening right now. But it wasn't groomed in a violent way or anything like that. And for me, at the age that I saw it as an opportunity, basically, where I was addicted to smoking cannabis but couldn't afford it. So the other option then was the person I used to get cannabis from would be like, okay, do you know what? I know you can't afford it, but I'll give it here. I'll take some of this, yeah, and then basically just sell that and make sure you've got my money by next week Friday. For a couple of weeks, things were going swimmingly because for me, I'm thinking, yep, my mate, he's just giving me this thing here for free. All I've got to do is get his money back. Do you know what I mean? And then after probably about 2 or 3 weeks, I ended up being my best customer. Got into debt with him and then got to a point where I had to then avoid him. And then if I wanted to go and get cannabis, I had to go and find somebody else who wouldn't tell him that I'd bought off somebody else and things like that. And then ended up just getting into the whole song and dance around those type of things and then ended up being in debt from that. So now you've got people who will groom young people into selling drugs and then it turns into violence within a matter of weeks from that. So for me, it was in a different time. But for me, it was always kind of like being artistic. When I was young, I used to do graffiti, I used to break dance, I used to body pop and everything as well. So I'd never really thought about transitioning into rapping or anything like that as well. I always used to rap other people's songs and things like that. I could rap other people's acts off the top of the head, do you know what I mean? But never actually thought about writing and writing my own songs or anything like that. But then I was inspired by another rapper in Luton who was the other part of For Life Cypher, a rapper called Life MC. And because he was another local rapper who I'd known him for years before he raps and things like that. And then he'd just come out of prison and then because all the time he spent in prison, he was literally just spent every day of like 5 years just writing lyrics and then came out to be like an incredible rapper. And then he got invited to go on to Kiss FM on the Max and Dave show to rap on there. And then that inspired me to think, right, if somebody else from Luton can do this, I'm sure I can do this as well. Do you know what I mean? And then, like I said, because I was so heavily influenced by American rap, I went and did my first rap to him in this heavy American accent. He used to rap in a slight American accent, but nowhere near as bad as mine. But then we formed the group from there. And then for me, it was an out for me to just get away from just the rigmarole of basically doing what everybody else was doing in Luton, so far as like either selling drugs, working at Vauxhalls, or basically just doing the same mundane things that everyone else was doing for me. And for me, it was an opportunity. And I was lucky as well. So I was lucky at the time because of the timing of it, really. So
And then you went on tour with the Gorillaz.
yeah, we went on tour. And so all the Gorillaz, that came out of
That's
nowhere.
amazing.
Yeah, let's talk more about purpose and talk about Wingman mentors and work that you're doing in your community, why you felt inspired to start it, and a little bit about the programs that you're running and the programs that you're involved with and why you wanted to give back and start supporting young people in Luton.
Yeah, well, for me, I've been doing youth work for, say, probably about 10 years now. So it started from working in the Prevent sector. So Prevent is an initiative in the UK where it basically looks for people that maybe show red flags of being radicalized, whether that be right-wing or Islamist ideology, or even further ideologies where there isn't any specific ideology for them to put that person in, but they may be a risk for themselves or the wider public. So I was working in schools. Things had kind of started to dry up with the music. So I was working in schools, basically working with young people who were on the periphery of that. And then that kind of developed into working with young people who were being groomed online and also in the community for that, but also they were then being groomed. We were noticing that people were being groomed to get into gangs and groomed to get into serious youth violence and gang activity. So with Luton being such a hotbed for that, and also I've got kids as well. So my eldest son ended up going to prison for a period of time, and then my youngest son was quite heavily involved in gangs and capitalised as well. So that for me was kind of trigger point to be like, well, I had to give them advice for them, and the reason that they were probably involved in the lifestyle that they were in is because of me not giving them the advice that they needed, in the same way that I ignored it when I was younger. And then I think the catalyst that really made it happen was when I had my daughter, and then saw how a lot of these young boys in particular, and also young girls, were as well. And for me, it was about, right, the community she's going to be growing up in, I want to somehow do what I can do to try and influence how these young people are going to grow up within my town as well. And then hopefully, if I'm doing it, some other people will follow on and do the same thing as well. So like, I'm a firm believer of the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And I want to be part of that village, and I want other people to be part of that village to be able to, for us to just not be so reliant on the council or the police or the school teachers to be raising our children when you are somebody. So instead of being one of those people that sees a problem and says, like, why doesn't somebody do anything about that? Recognize that you are somebody as well and that you can do something about that as well. So with helping, we're getting in my town as well with regards to serious youth violence and knife crime, I just felt like I just needed to do something about it. And I first got into doing this work directly with gang work and around county lines and knife crime, working with St Giles Trust. I was basically introduced to St Giles Trust by Junior Smart, with a close friend of mine. Prior to that, I'm still with close friends who I consider him to be my mentor now, really. So with the experience that I gained from working with St Giles Trust and then working with other various organisations, I felt like there needed to be something that was Luton centric, that actually concentrated on my hometown, for me to be able to help reduce some of the issues that were being seen every day. Another thing I've always hated as well is where an incident may happen, whether that be a stabbing or an assault, and then it gets put on social media, on Facebook in particular, and people will trash Luton town and make it sound like it's an absolute hellhole, when it's not a hellhole. And it's got, like I say, it's got the same problems that every other town and every other city's got within the UK. But I know some of the leafiest suburbs in the UK have got problems with county lines and drug use. Yeah, I mean, regardless of wherever you are, if there's drugs there, there's crime there. But I'd always noticed that Luton was always getting slated so badly. And for me, it was about, well, okay, those things are always going to happen, but it's about doing something to be able to try and promote the good things that are actually happening in the town as well. So we started with our mentors, and we started our Critical Bleed Kit campaign. So the Critical Bleed Kit is basically a kit that contains everything that's needed inside there to prevent a fatality should somebody get stabbed, or if there was a dog attack, or if there was a car incident and somebody had a fatal bleed. So give you tools such as tourniquet or a chest seal, different tools, as I say, to be able to prevent that bleed until the ambulance comes. The person can bleed out in 15 minutes. So it gives you that time to be able to try and prevent that. And we've got some areas in Luton and Bedfordshire where it can take up to 20 minutes or 30 minutes for an ambulance to get there. So we started the Critical Bleed Kit campaign to try and equip the area with the tools that were needed, but also the knowledge that's needed to be able to try and prevent that fatality as well. The confidence to be able to intervene, possibly not intervene in the stabbing or anything like that, but then at least if they see somebody laying on the floor, it could be your friend that's just been stabbed. At least then you've then got the knowledge to be right, okay, there's a bleed kit here, or if I haven't got a bleed kit, I know that I can take off my t-shirt and use it as a tourniquet, or take off my t-shirt and stuff it in the wound, and just equip the community with that knowledge as well, really, just to make it a safer town. We've now got 200 bleed kits in and around Luton and Bedfordshire, situated in either 24-hour shops, in cabinets such as defibrillator cabinets as well, but if they're not in the defibrillator cabinet, you call 999 and then you can get access to the bleed kit from that box as well. So we've got 200 of those in and around Luton and Bedfordshire. That then progressed into me having the idea of getting the National Knife Angel brought to Luton. And the National Knife Angel's a 27-foot statue that's built from knives that have been retrieved from surrender bins across the UK. An organisation called the British Ironworks connected with 43 different police forces. And then they collected all of these knives and then brought them back to the British Ironworks to basically create this statue that looks like an angel with its hands out and got wings at the back, and it's all made of knives. It's basically to represent the fact that young people do turn in their knives and basically can change their lives around as well, but just to try and raise a discussion around knife crime, the reason that happens, how to reduce it. And then since that, we've been working with young people who are habitual knife carriers or known to be involved in gang activity in the area to try and reduce their gang activity and prevent them from eventually entering the criminal justice system.
Yeah. What Wingman is doing is addressing a problem here and now, and that's why I think that's why community projects, lived experience projects like yours are so important, because they're serving justice for young boys or young people carrying knives now. If they, it's not looking at this as a 10-year plan going, oh, we need to put these education units in here. We need to get early years intervention working here. And in 15, 20, 30 years, we'll see a reduction. But that doesn't serve justice to the young boys who are carrying knives today, and will use them tonight. And so, yeah, just massive. It's really inspiring side.
With that, sorry to cut you there, George, even along with that, there's been such a rapid rise in girls involved in gang activity and serious youth violence as well. I've worked with quite a lot of girls who can be deemed as quite violent as well. It's sad that sometimes that gets slipped and is missed on the radar because of it being a girl, and it's basically looked at as a different type of behavioural problems rather than it actually being the same as the situation as well young boys are going through as well. So obviously there are different issues as well, such as young females being sexually abused and different things like that as well. I mean, and criminal sexual exploitation is rife within gang activity as well, and a lot of that slips under the radar as well. So the more organisations that there are, and also one of the problems that we have with youth work as well is we work with one of the only organisations that work with young people from the age of 9 up until 25. A lot of organisations won't work with young people from the age of below that. They'll work from the age of like 12 or 13, when a lot of the time it's too late by then. And a lot of the work needs to be done from such a younger age to try and change that mindset, to make that young person understand that not every young person is going around carrying a knife. And there's a lot less young people carrying knives than there are than what they think there is. And because of what they're being fed on their social media feeds and what they're being fed by their friends, they're not realizing they're actually self-traumatizing themselves and thinking, right, everyone else is carrying a knife, so I've got to carry a knife as well. A lot of the young people that I work with who carry knives don't actually really want to use it. Women I work with who, her name's Rose, she lost her son about 8 years ago, where I was walking down the street, saw a guy, both of them gave each other a dirty look, and then he's basically, my friend's son pulled his t-shirt up and showed the handle of a knife. The other kid rode off on his bike. About 10 minutes later, a car pulled up, and then 4 guys got out of the car with knives and then stabbed him up. And then my friend's son didn't even pull his knife out once. So he only had it on him to pretend and front like he was really about to use it when he really wasn't about that life. I'm a firm believer if he didn't have that knife on him to show that other young person, then he'd probably still be here today. But as I say, a lot of young people will just carry it without even having any intention of using it, but they're not realizing that they could end up getting stabbed with their own knife themselves. I work with a lot of young people who end up getting stabbed by their own knives just because they weren't willing to use it. For me, it's about trying to take the knife out of their heart, rather than just taking the knife out of their hands, take it out of their heart and give them different opportunities for them to want to be somewhere else. So if you try and tell a young person who's going out on the roads all the time and hanging around with other gangs not to carry a knife, it's basically like telling a soldier not to go out in the field, but don't bring a gun. So a soldier will go anywhere else and not bring his gun because he's not going out in the field. But if this kid's going to keep on going out in the field, he's going to want to bring his weapon because he knows everyone else has got their weapons. So if we can provide these safe spaces and different mindsets for all these young people to think, you know what, rather than me hanging in this place where I know I could be in danger, actually quite like basketball, let me just get back into that. Actually quite like football, let me get back into that. And by the age of like 11, 12, sorry if I'm changing the topic here, but by the age of like 12 or 13, a lot of young people actually forget who they are, especially if they start smoking cannabis and hanging around with the wrong crowd as well. For me, I used to really be into tomography. I used to really be into breakdancing and BMXing and things like that, and basketball as well. By the time I got to age 13, 14, when I was addicted to smoking cannabis, I'd forgotten about any of those things I was interested in. To try and encourage these people to not forget who they are, and keep that frame of mind of what they like to be doing as well, and that can be the deterrent or the diversion for them to be able to continue on a positive path as opposed to the same path that everybody else is on.
And that, what makes Wingman so successful at engaging these at-risk young people and pulling them out of a life of crime? What do you think is the reason why you guys are so successful?
Do you know, it can sound really fickle. Sometimes it can literally just be down to how you look. A lot of times I'll present myself to a young person or I'll get a referral to a young person. They'll begrudgingly accept it and I'll go around to do the first visit. And most of the time they just think I'm going to be some stiff guy who's coming around to tell them the same thing that every other professional's told them as well. Sometimes I can go from the door.
George to show up. So they're expecting somebody like George or myself to show up.
Or a black version of you guys, either way, do you know what I mean? But I think as soon as they see me and they see the chain, they see how I am and things like that, and then one of the first things I always tell them is I'm not the social services and I'm not the police. So just breaking those barriers down from the outset, I think has definitely been like part of our success. And with the other mentors that I've got, they're really just like me as well. And I think part of what definitely helped me is my music background. So, and like 2 of the other mentors that I've got are both rappers as well. And I think just having that equal thing a lot of the time, even if the young person isn't into music or anything like that, it kind of like the young person can engage with the mentor in a different way to how they engage with other professionals or their parents, because they feel like I understand them more. And then after that, it's really just about consistency. And if you're not consistent with what you're doing, you won't, especially with mentoring, you see success from it. And for me, sometimes the harder a kid is to crack. For me, that's the challenge. And I'm like, well, okay, nobody else has managed to do it and have any success with this kid. I'm going to have some success with this kid, regardless. If it takes for me they've given me 12 weeks to do it. If it takes for me to have to do 18 weeks and do the next 6 weeks, I'm paid for it. I'm prepared to do that because I want to see this change in this kid. I mean, obviously it doesn't work with everyone, but for me, it's happened enough. If I can have a room of 20 kids and I can change one kid's mindset, for me, that's worth it, because you possibly saved one life and you possibly saved other people's lives from him and then not taking other people's lives as well. So for me, that's the impact for me. So one of the things I love about this and knowing I've had positive impacts on a young person I've worked with is if I may have closed that client down a year or two ago, and then they'll call me. A lot of the time, a young person will call me because their life turned left again and they might need some support. But then a lot of the time, they'll call me just to find out how I'm doing. And for me, that's a massive success, because problems have gone from obviously the problems have reduced for them, and things are going well enough for them to be thinking about how somebody else is.
Yeah, there's so many interesting points there about just like your reality as a rapper and being a culture that they understand, somebody they can connect with and just kind of see themselves in is so important.
Sometimes it's just down to the sneakers. Sometimes literally just down to the sneakers I've got.
Have the right sneakers, right?
I think that's just it. Because I'm a collector of Jordans. I mean, and because Jordans are hot right now, every kid's on. So I'll literally walk into a room, a kid won't really look at me or anything like that, look at my trainers, and then that will start the conversation, and then we can go from there.
I just know from our conversation, Si, that I think you really perfectly resemble what a community leader or a local change maker is. And because although you've got this Wingman project, which is doing those three things that you've spoken about, is getting kids to hand knives in, the blood kits, and then the intervention and actually working with these young people from a lived experience point of view, you're also somebody in the community that people go to. And I know that you've been sort of helping a family or specifically a mother who lost her son recently. And I wondered if you could talk about what it means to be a community leader in that regard.
There was a situation with a mum that we've been working with. She lost her son in 2023. His name was Ashraf Abimana. He was murdered. It was a chaotic day in Luton in 2023. I think there were 6 stabbings on that day. Ashraf wasn't gang related or associated with any gang, never carried a knife or anything like that. He was actually the carer to his younger brother, who's severely autistic as well. So on this particular night, he was out with a friend, just basically got caught up in the wrong crowd, and then sadly lost his life due to a stabbing. He comes from a Muslim family, and we spoke with his mum a couple of months ago, and we found out that they still hadn't had the funeral for him because they were transferring him back to Uganda to have the funeral. And because he'd been murdered in such a way that there were some samples that the coroner had that needed to be released in order for his body to be able to be transferred to Uganda. But it cost £2,000 for her to be able to get these samples back from the coroner. And then also it cost, I think, about another £1,000 for them to be transferred to Uganda in order for the funeral to happen. So, and on top of that as well, where she hadn't been working since the murder had happened, she'd accumulated quite a lot of debt and just basically was living in dire straits at that point as well. So we decided to use my platform to set up a GoFundMe for her to be able to get some money to be able to repatriate her son back to Uganda. And we managed to raise up £5,000 for her to be able to repatriate the samples and then have the funeral. And I think they're actually in Uganda at the moment. I'd like to be able to use my platform for those kind of positive things to have an impact in my own community.
I mean, just the story of you supporting that mother and father and the funeral is just like, it's, that's why we started this podcast, is because you can't write that in an eloquent way enough in an impact report. The way that you spoke about it and the way that, I could, we're not in the same room, we're not in the same building, but I can feel the love from you.
Yeah.
For that family.
I felt so compelled to do that because we'd had a relationship with the mum already as well. And then for her to be put in such a circumstance where there was no way she was going to be able to get that money. And I knew that if I put it out on my social media, I could get it. And the fact that nobody else had done it, I just felt compelled to do it.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really interesting and inspiring conversation. I just wanted to ask you before we leave, if you could have listeners, people who are going to listen to this podcast, take home one message, what would that be?
Know yourself.
Know yourself. You expand on it? You expand?
It's fine. As I was saying earlier, I think a part of the reason that we're in the position in the world right now is because a lot of people are either don't know themselves or are too scared to actually express who they actually are because of what's deemed as being cool and things like that. We're musicians that are out there that are amazing musicians and they can release something, but until somebody else co-signs that and says it's cool, some people won't even say, I really like that song because somebody else hasn't said that they like it. So, and you've got a lot of people who will just jump on the bandwagon of something because other people have jumped on it.
The right person's on the bandwagon, so they'll hop on.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I've worked with kids that, like, you can ask them what their interests are. I mean, and then if I'm at home with them, with their parent, and their parents say, "Oh, he likes cooking," I mean, and he'll actually love cooking, but he would never admit that to his friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's about people being confident enough to be like, "Yeah, no, you know what? I am actually a really good cook" to their mates. You know what I mean? And then them realizing how much more of a life skill that is than it just being this handsy thing because their friends don't want to think about cooking or anything like that, or it's deemed as being an effeminate thing to be able to cook when it's a skill that everybody should learn and know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's for me, like just me, not me even learning to know myself has made me a more confident and whole individual because I know what I like and I know what I don't like, and then now I'm prepared to tell someone no and upset them there and then rather than lie to them just to keep them happy for a period of time and then have to let them down further down the line. And then that's just come from me growing and knowing myself and being confident enough to be able to express myself like that. I mean, I think music helped a lot with that as well because it made me have to just throw away any kind of inhibitions that I've got of what people might think of what I'm talking about in the song or how I'm portraying the song or anything like that. But that's what basically got me to where I am right now as well. So I think if a lot more people were true to themselves, we'd be living in a better world.
Well, yeah. So why don't you let us know where people can find your work? If you get somebody wants to get in touch with you and Wingman Mentors, where can we send them? Where we can send links to?
Yeah, you can catch us at wingmanmentors.com on our website. And we're on all social media. So that's Wingman, Wingman, Mentors, Mentors. That's on Instagram. That's on TikTok, which I'm finally getting to use and get my daughter to help me get up to speed on that. But we're on Facebook as well. As I say, if you want to drop us a message on either Facebook or directly to our website at wingmanmentors.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you.
Awesome, man. Well, we really appreciate it, not only for your time today, but all the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
keep it up. I mean, it's inspiring, and we'll be happy to be a part of your journey and be in touch and just know yourself, right?
Yeah, know yourself.
If there's one message, remember, know yourself.
Know
The
yourself.
world will be a better place if we all know who we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Cheers,
Cool.
man. Well, yeah, we really appreciate
Thank you, Rob.
it.
I appreciate
Thanks,
that.
guys.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Cheers,
Nice
man.
one.
Bye-bye.